Welcome to the Audible presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Stuart Mandel, joined as always by my colleagues from The Athletic, Bruce Feldman, Ralph Russo. We're going to recap Week 12, and there is a lot to get to, especially a lot of consequential results in the SEC. Remember, this Sunday show, I guess we've only got a few left, guys. 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific every Sunday on YouTube at Audible Show. All episodes of the Audible, 3 episodes a week, are always on YouTube. Guys, let's start high noon Eastern on Saturday. Texas A&M falls behind 30-3 at home to a bad South Carolina team, and by the start of the fourth quarter, they're winning. This game had a lot going on, including a weird thing with a police officer. Bruce, what did you take away from the fact that A&M was down that much in the first place, but then, of course, the fact that they had it was a historic comeback?
Yeah, honestly, it was the weirdest game of the season so far because they jumped all over the Aggies, did it in College Station, and then on top of it, like it felt like everything that could go wrong for A&M was going wrong. It was like this is just not their day. They're dropping passes for first downs, they're dropping passes for touchdowns. You're reminded in that game where there's some elite talent on South Carolina, at least in certain places. Oh yeah, this is the Lenora Sellers that embarrassed Clemson last year. You know, he may not complete 75% of his passes, but he's going to make some wow plays. And you got an edge rusher who's one of the most dynamic, talents. He comes in and disrupts a play where it basically, feels like a game-changing play. And then Nick Harbor, who's my number one freaks guy for 2 years, he makes this, just runs away from everybody. And then there's the thing you allude to where he gets into this weird dust up with this cop, which the video is embarrassing, I think, for law enforcement. It's like, you're not there to, to confront the other team, especially in that moment. It was just so bizarre. And on top of it, I remembered, we've talked a little bit about this at times where it's like sideline interviews, usually in games, yield nothing. Shane Beamer, after the first quarter, gave a very interesting, impassioned comments to the ESPN sideline reporter where he's talking about yeah, we beat them by 24. It's almost like they were puffing up their chest and it's going out. Well, it was like at halftime, I don't know if Elko got footage of that tape and played it for his team as the halftime speech, or the teams just changed uniforms because it looked like as bad as they were for the first 30 minutes, that was South Carolina the other way, and they just dominated. And I don't know, Ralph, if A&M hasn't been beaten this year. It's not like their schedule is, by SEC standards, a gauntlet to this point. Did you look at them and think, okay, they needed this kind of game to maybe, it's not like they lost it, but this helps them in the long run to have to dig deep and rally within a game in a way that they probably hadn't been tested since the Notre Dame game and the Notre Dame trip, which felt like a season ago.
Well, nobody's been tested like this in the SEC in the last, and maybe ever, right? Falling behind by 27 and having to rally back. They've been tested enough, and I'll let Stu get into the schedule. Here's my question. It's rhetorical. I don't expect you to answer it, Stu, is can you lose the Heisman and win the Heisman in the same game? Because my nephew's got a futures ticket on Marcel Reed, and at halftime I was like, yep, I guess you can burn that. And then he texted me back. He's like, did he just win it back? And like, he was so bad in the first game, he was like most responsible for putting them in that big hole. So it was quite a ride for the Aggies. And yeah, I'll just throw it right back to you, Stu. Like, I'll set you up on this. For the first time ever, this season, I flipped Indiana and Texas A&M. I had Texas A&M number 2 on my ballot, and I flipped them this week and put Indiana number 2 and Texas A&M number 3, which to me is not a big deal at all. And there's a few other reasons for that, but I finally got to myself thinking I think Indiana's been overall better here.
Yeah, I don't want to nitpick a team that has gotten itself to 10-0 and absolutely deserves, obviously, to be in the top 3 in the country. As they were down 30-3, I couldn't help but think about some of the interactions I had during the week of A&M fans who were had created this kind of fake controversy about why they should be ahead of Indiana for number 2. But I think it has to be pointed out. So it was last week, right, that people are like, oh, I can't believe Indiana had to do a last-minute comeback to beat Penn State. And we were like, well, Penn State's better than its record, and most importantly, it was on the road. Here, A&M is at home, and they're playing a team that is now 1-7 in the SEC. Like, really? You remember, they also had their hands full with Arkansas. So you look at A&M's schedule. This is when we talk about unbalanced schedules and how these conference races can be so deceiving. Guys, there were 7 other teams, A&M, and then there are 7 other SEC teams that were in the rankings last week, in the committee rankings. A&M has played 7 SEC games and somehow hasn't played any of those teams. I do think Missouri will be back in the rankings this week. Missouri, if you look at the SEC standings, is in 8th place. That's the quote-unquote best team A&M has played in the SEC. The teams they have played are in 8th place, 10th place, and then 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. Does that mean A&M is a fraud? No.
They won at Notre Dame, by the way.
They did win
Let's
at
not
Notre
forget
Dame.
that. Let's not forget that.
But that is big. I mean, it's most of their schedule is against the worst SEC teams.
Yeah. And so then, like, you look at Georgia. Georgia has finished 7-1 in the SEC. Actually, still needs a little bit of help to get into the SEC title game. But these guys won at Tennessee. They beat Ole Miss. We're going to talk about it in a little bit. They just stomped Texas. Their loss was to Alabama. Like, the standings say A&M's ahead of Georgia. Let's think about this a little bit critically. To me, I think Georgia's the best team in the SEC.
So this was a point when this whole super conference 18, 16 team conference thing came up that I made even back then, the first year, last year, and I still stress. We talk about cross-conference strength of schedules a lot. Oh, we played an SEC schedule. It's better than an ACC schedule. The problem with these big conferences and the imbalanced schedules is the intra-conference strength of schedules. And I tweeted this out last week, even before what happened with Texas A&M. A&M is going to play in the SEC championship game, and I listed a bunch of those teams that you listed. And Ohio State is going to play in the Big Ten championship game. Doesn't play Oregon, doesn't play Indiana, doesn't play Iowa, doesn't play USC. Georgia Tech could get to the ACC championship game. Doesn't play Miami, doesn't play Virginia, doesn't play SMU, doesn't play Louisville. Like, that's bad for determining who the best team in a conference is. It's not a strength of schedule like, oh, you ain't played nobody. It's just a bad way to determine the champion of a conference. And they all have an issue with it. And the SEC is the one where it's most glaring because of what you just put out there, Stu.
Can I? We have a good comment we'll get to in a second. I'll maybe Ralph will tee back, but I do want to point this out. It's related to the SEC, but it's really more related to what you just said. And I sit there and watch the SEC. I think for the most part, it's still going to work itself out. The conferences that I feel like are most behooved, especially it's the ACC, where if you have, it was almost laughable that Duke was still in play for the ACC title game until they got whipped.
They're still in play.
Oh my gosh,
Bruce,
Not
in
really.
Play.
Not
Okay. But let's not get too hung up on that point.
Yeah.
Let's not get. All I'm saying is, if you're the ACC, I think you need to have a conference tiebreaker. Your first one being, we're going to put the highest ranked teams in there, because if you don't, you're going to have somebody going, all right, there's a team like Miami's the glaring one here. Like, they're going to need major help to get into the conference title game. And I think a lot of people look at it and go, they're the ones who are going to have the best resume because they actually have the best win anybody in the ACC has, because they beat Notre Dame head to head. And they're going to have, if they win out and Notre Dame wins out, they'll have the same record head to head. The point is, if you do something where, all right, we're going to take it. And again, I think this is more relevant to the ACC, because I think the SEC is going to be, I wouldn't, whether A&M is number 3 or number 2 or number 4, like, Indiana's going to play Ohio State in a couple of weeks, most likely. If Indiana beats Ohio State, they're probably going to be number 1 in the country, right? If A&M beats if A&M beats Texas, which now looks more likely after the way, we'll get to more of the Texas-Georgia game, and then they end up beating Georgia in the SEC title game, all right, maybe we'll have 1 versus 2, but they're getting in. I don't think there's a huge difference in how that works out. Where it matters most is who actually gets in the playoff. I think we're nitpicking a little bit, but Ralph, I want to ask you this comment. It's from Craig Brokaw, and I think it surprised me when I actually read it twice. Scenario where SEC only gets 3 teams. Oklahoma loses to LSU. Vandy loses. They would play at Tennessee late. Alabama loses to Auburn. Any of those 2 things happen to go with USC beating Oregon, Michigan beating Ohio State, Georgia Tech beating Georgia, Miami wins out. The only thing on that where I feel like is more likely to happen is Miami winning the last 2 games. I don't think Michigan's beaten Ohio State this year. But if that kind of doomsday scenario plays out, Ralph, any credibility, any credence to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't work it all out in my head, and it does lead us to talking about the other huge event yesterday was Oklahoma beating Alabama, right? Oklahoma was, I think, on the verge of being eliminated, really needed to beat Alabama, and played a great defensive game, got outgained like almost 2-1, but came up with a bunch of turnovers and did its defense thing. Oklahoma's offense, by the way, is not very good. But again, their defense is really good, even without our Mason Thomas. The problem with all those scenarios is LSU is a dead tiger. That's not happening. Auburn, Alabama, come on, man. Come on, man. I know some weird things happen.
Wait, Oklahoma plays Missouri too, like that.
Yeah, they do. They have a better chance to lose to Missouri than
with
probably
a third
LSU.
String quarterback, with that third string quarterback. I mean,
with a running back who runs for 300 yards.
I get it, but they're not going to run for 300 yards against
the ones on there that are not going to happen is Alabama losing to Auburn. In Michigan, well, I will never say Michigan can't beat Ohio State. Like, I've
the one that has
the
one that has the most likely chance to happen is Vandy could certainly lose to Tennessee, but I don't think that's the.
But in reality, what happened, Stu, yesterday, and I know you wrote a lot about this, is when Oklahoma beats Alabama, now all of a sudden there's a more of an SEC hater scenario that is going to be people are just going to probably have to swallow here.
Well. Could that happen? Sure. But what are the chances of that? Not very good. I mean, I think you are much more likely.
What is Can you explain, because we just talked about the doomsday on the other side. When you say could that happen, because I'm sitting there watching that after what Oklahoma did. And look, we can write out Texas, but I'm sitting there going, okay, Ole Miss is in. Texas A&M is in. Georgia is basically in. Now we're left with Oklahoma now all of a sudden has a more viable path, and they have a gauntlet of the schedule that they've gone through again with John Mateer coming off an injury, right? They played their way in, found a way to win. And then let's put Vandy on the side. They have a decent shot to go 10-2. I think there's 5 teams ahead of Vandy that have a path to get in from the SEC, that have a realistic path to get in the playoff. Stu, so how do you feel about 5 SEC teams? Do you think it's more than likely to happen? I mean, whether fans hate the SEC or not, or they're sick of it from before, so I think it's kind of a moot point. If those are the five most deserving teams at the expense of, you're probably going to get one in from these other conferences.
I mean, of course, a lot of this is also involves Notre Dame, and Notre Dame. I continue to think if they get to 10-2, they're going to be in. Ralph may disagree that they're quite that comfortable, but I am now under what the Oklahoma win did was make me say, 5 teams might be the floor at this point for the SEC. Like, I thought 4 was more likely than 5, but now you got Oklahoma in the mix to go with the teams you mentioned, Bruce. Now we need to see Tuesday, where does Alabama drop to? But I don't think they're going to drop out of the top 10 because they have such a good resume. The one I brought up, you called it an SEC hater doomsday scenario. The one I brought up in Final Thoughts is 6. And I don't think that's as unrealistic as people might think. You put Vandy to the side, but Vandy is going to be, when the new rankings come out Tuesday, not too far from at-large status. And then there's Texas.
Texas to me, Stu, is out. They got blown out yesterday. They lost to Florida. They lost to Florida. I'm sorry. If they beat Texas A&M, congratulations, you got bragging rights. I don't think in a year when the SEC is already going to probably have 5 teams in, you're getting a 6 team in, and it's a 6 team that lost to Florida, who's going to be like 4-8 or 5-7. And you also got, by the way, you got blown out like in mid-November by Georgia.
How many times this season have we thought Texas was dead, and then the next thing we knew, Texas had come back into it? I'm not going to say, like, if Texas beats Texas A&M, I'm not going to say, boop, they're in the playoff by any means, because there's so many other parts involved there. But I don't think they're dead, because as bad as that game was, and it was bad, they have a chance to make their final impression be in 2 weeks from now, beat an 11-0 team.
Let's not talk about this. I think we're going too far down a rabbit hole here. If they beat them, yeah, they maybe have a shot, but I'm sorry, they got whipped yesterday.
Bruce,
that game wasn't close.
You are very so yes, you are doing that thing people do where you get caught up in the moment.
Where I pay attention to what happens on the field. That's what I'm doing.
You're getting caught up in the thing where, okay, that was such a bad loss, they're done, without stopping to think what you might feel 2 weeks from now.
I'm not going to feel it, Stu. Stu, you're not getting 6 teams in. They're not going to say, oh yeah, we're going to give a 6th SEC team a spot because they had one very good win.
If Texas went 9-3 and the last spot,
you don't need 9-3 teams. You don't need 3 lost teams in. So
you're just shutting out the pot. It involves some other dominoes, to be clear.
Yeah.
But it is still, it's not done. It's just not, because what if, okay, we have a big game next week between USC and Oregon, right? Where I think, and I'd be curious your guys' thoughts on this. It feels to me like a elimination game for one of them, because I don't think they clearly don't respect Oregon's resume, right? So if Oregon is 10-2 without a single win, I don't think they'd have a top 25 win at that point. Like, I think they could get put out to the side. But then USC, being USC, could win that game and then lose after that, right?
To UCLA.
So, yeah. So I think what I'm saying is it doesn't take too many dominoes for a 6th SEC team to come into play, but there are several people above them at this point.
I think it maybe takes a little more than even that. I kind of see what your point is here, Stu. Like the never say never. Look at all this scenario, and if you have like the strings on the board.
I mean, Alabama had about as bad a loss in the second to last game of the season last year against Oklahoma. You're like, ooh, they stink. They're out, and they ended up being the first. But
they were out. But they were
out, but they were barely out. That's why I say you don't rule teams out entirely.
Here's the thing, though. Like I think we were projecting the Texas 9-3 thing at a point when we thought, well, there might not be that many 10-2 teams, right? So now all of a sudden, like they might be the best of the 9-3s, or they're 9-3 and they're going against like, an ACC team with kind of a flimsy resume at 10-2. Now it looks like, again, like we're looking like we could have very easily 6 10+ win SEC teams alone getting in front of them, and 4 10+ win Big Ten teams, and Texas Tech and BYU that could still be a thing, right? Because BYU is moving along pretty well and we all think Texas Tech is an at-large team at this point, as long as they take care of business, even if they lose. I'm not willing to eliminate Miami, especially when you start talking about, listen, if Texas is alive at 9-3, then get Miami back in there. Wait a second. So the two things that happened yesterday that feel definitive, is Texas is eliminated, and you're kind of pushing back on that. And on my end, it was Notre Dame is in. Notre Dame is kind of clinched, only because like Stanford and Syracuse, they're not losing to those games. But I push back on that because I keep looking at Miami and going, wait a second. How is Miami on the outside and Notre Dame clearly in? It just doesn't compute to me. These teams are, we talk about the committee, well, they have to be close. How are these two teams not close? So the two things that you're talking about, again, like the Texas scenario, it just like there's too many other things that have to happen, I think, in front of Texas to open up the 9-3. But Stu, you think Notre Dame has clinched, and I keep pushing back on that, even though, frankly, I feel like I'm screaming at windmills now.
I don't think Notre Dame has clinched, but I think they're in really good shape. And you might say, okay, well, they don't have that great a resume. Well, they don't, but they will have won 10 straight games going into Selection Sunday. And at some point, like the committee, it's a subjective thing, right? At some point, you just got to look at it and say, like, look at how Notre Dame's playing. Like, you're telling me subjectively, you don't think they're one of the 10 best teams in the country? Of course they are. And if they're one of the top 10 teams in the country now, and I think do we think they'll be ninth on Tuesday?
I mean, they were ninth. They would be, they're probably going to be at worst ninth, maybe eighth.
I guess they could get bumped down a spot if if Alabama stays above them.
Right, right. There's that possibility.
But they're still in the at-large field at that point. Then they win 2 more games. I don't, you're not going to, the committee, I don't see them saying like they're one of the top 10 teams in the country. They're playing so well. And then on the last day say, actually, we're going to drop them down. But there are a couple, Bruce, I'll let you talk in a second, but I just wanted to I had written down a couple scenarios that could screw them. One is BYU winning the Big 12. So there's 2. Then you have 2 big, you have both Texas Tech and BYU. BYU's behind them now. And maybe BYU would still be behind them, but they would get the automatic berth. And then Michigan, right? If Michigan is a 10-2 team that beats a 11-0 Ohio State, I would think they would vault into it.
So what I wanted to bring up is we were talking about the potential of a 10-2 Vandy. When you look at Vandy's resume, Vandy would, I don't think, is getting in ahead of Notre Dame, and I don't think they should be getting in ahead of Miami's 10-2. Miami's got a much better win, and honestly, if you watch Miami, you saw they had some injuries to Mark Fletcher. All of a sudden now Gerard Pringle's the freshman who stepped up, and it's been like the guy. All of a sudden they blew NC State off the field. Yeah, and I know if you watch them when they played Syracuse plays basically 2 high safeties. They're not worried about Miami's running game. Now people are going to be worried about Miami's running game because this guy brought them a spark. And I do think that what you saw a little bit in midseason was a team that was playing a lot of guys who were maybe not ready to go in that moment. And now all of a sudden, I think they got a second win. They're looking very good. I think they would be ahead of Vandy in this scenario if you just look the resume and just say, hey, Vandy's a great story, but they don't have a great bunch of wins here. I mean, beating LSU when LSU is ranked isn't going to mean anything at the end of the day. And what I wanted to kind of revisit here is we talked a lot. The most consequential rankings after what's going to be the last one feels like it's the first one because the committee sets their order and you feel like, okay, Miami was so far behind Notre Dame. And I remember that week because you guys did the Tuesday night show and Ralph talked about it a little bit. And then we had Ari Wasserman on our show, and it was me, Ralph, and Ari. And I felt like Ralph was having to defend the committee's position, even though he really didn't feel it based on his own AP actual ballot, right? Where he had Miami was not very far, was not 15 or 18, or I think they had him 18 originally. Nice. Yeah. So Ralph, on how the committee operates, is it a case where it's like, oh, we thought this back, whatever it was, October 31st, and, just unless something dramatic happens, we don't unthink it? I mean, how open do you think they are to go, wait a minute, this team looks a lot better now. They won the game in the beginning of the year, and I think Notre Dame looks really good now too. But I think that was more a reflection of Miami doesn't look very good right now. They look really wobbly, and now they don't look like that.
I mean, they're literally not supposed to. They talk about every day, clean sheet of paper, or every week, clean sheet.
Right, but we're projecting, yeah.
I'm with you. But what I'm saying is, do you think they do? Well, they're literally not supposed to. So maybe we'll find out this week, right? If Miami makes a big jump up. Now, that doesn't look like what's going to happen because only you know, if you kind of look at who was in front of Miami, only Texas lost, so that doesn't look like what's going to happen. And Stu, you know, just to bring it back to that, my point with Notre Dame is not that they are so comfortably in. It's I can't understand why Notre Dame is so comfortably in and Miami is so comfortably out. And that is breaking my brain a little bit. You know, there's a path here where Miami's going to play. Miami and Notre Dame will have played four same common opponents, but they're all kind of crappy common opponents except for Pitt. So I don't know if that's really going to matter much. No. I don't know, man. It's just, it goes back to what Bruce was saying before. Miami is clearly the most talented team in the ACC. They're a team that could probably win a playoff game, maybe even two. They are the highest ceiling team, and like, they're going to get bumped by their own ACC mate, Stu.
Yeah, well, there's nothing they can do about that, but there is, I mean, should Miami be ahead of Notre Dame becomes very relevant if Miami keeps winning. By the way, they're also one of those teams where, you know, maybe the committee was like, oh, I can't believe you lost to SMU. Well, guess who's still alive for the ACC title is SMU, right? The other one was to Louisville. Louisville's lost their last two games, but they're 7-3. So they're not quote unquote bad losses. The only time I can remember, and I don't claim to be able to remember every committee ranking of all time, but obviously that first year was the first time we'd gone through this. And what was the debate all season? I can't believe Baylor is behind TCU. Baylor beat TCU 61-58. They made them wait the entire season, and on the very last day, they bumped Baylor above TCU and actually dropped TCU several spots. It didn't matter.
But that shouldn't matter at all. As Ralph said, it's supposed to be a clean sheet. What a different group of people did, whatever it was, 10 years ago, that shouldn't matter. Have any
That's
relevance.
really the only time I can remember a big, like, a team drops several spots without having lost. But by the way, we should also mention real quick, the committee's in a bit of chaos right now. Mac Rhodes, the selection committee chair, who you've seen on the first two episodes, has taken a leave of absence at Baylor. There was an incident on the sideline at a game where he grabbed Michael Trigg's jersey, and then they said he was cleared of that, but now something else has happened that we don't have enough info on yet to say what it is. So Hunter Yurachek, the Arkansas AD, has moved up to chairman, and Mark Harlan from Utah has come back onto the committee. Maybe that doesn't mean anything. Maybe that doesn't matter, but there's at least one new voice now on the committee that wasn't there when they first ranked Miami and Notre Dame where they were. So another interesting game on Saturday, guys. USC falls behind double digits to Iowa and then scores 19 straight points and wins the game. Very weird ending. One of Iowa's assistant coaches got an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty for stepping onto the field, which gave USC a new set of downs, which allowed them to run out the clock. Game day is going to Eugene this week. There's a old-fashioned Pac-12 matchup in the Big Ten. USC at
Pac-10.
Oregon. Yeah, going back to Pac-10 or the Pac-8.
We are old enough to remember Pac-10. Pac-8.
Pac-8, maybe. Ralph, what do you think about USC now? I think you've said all along, like, I'm not sure if I have faith in Lincoln Riley. Not sure, but they're on a bit of a roll now.
I think that's it. It's like I'm still getting adjusted to like, oh, Lincoln Riley won like a tough game. And he's won some of these tough games, close games. They didn't do the dumb thing at the end that undermines them. They didn't have 3 touchdowns called back by penalties, and they sort of won in the margins. And that was so not USC last year, and really not USC the last couple of years. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around this USC, Lincoln Riley's USC, that's more of a buttoned up operation, setting up this huge game next week. I don't know if they quite have enough in the tank to beat Oregon. And I got a scenario that's maybe not great for the Big Ten, but I'll just want to throw it to you, Bruce, because literally none of us are closer to USC. And just like, what is going on out there? And are they suddenly getting the Lincoln Riley era that they paid for and that they hope for? Are we too quick to like throw out Lincoln Riley and say, well, this is clearly not going to work. It's just going to be a slog, and they're stuck with each other?
I think there's a couple of things that have gone on without like taking it to, they're paying for a team that should be competing for national titles. I don't think they're there, but they took a big step forward because for a lot of the season, I would say it's felt like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because there were these clunker of a road game where, it was Illinois, they got Notre Dame, ran it down their throats. That felt tough. There was a lot of times where Northwestern was running it down their throats. Even yesterday, it felt that way. They got down. But what I think you have to give them credit for is they are a mentally tougher team than they had been previously under Lincoln Riley. I do think they have one of the best players in the country in Mekhi Lemon. He, week in and week out, he makes huge plays for them. And I feel like they feed off of his energy. I feel like, they have another guy in Jacoby Lane who can make spectacular plays. So they're a problem for people defending them. And I think that carries through. Defensively, they're not great. They're not awful, but they're not great, right? And I think they came within an inch of Iowa having a chance to win that game where Weegan catches the ball, but if his shoe size is a size 9 instead of a size 11, they're not, that's a catch, right? And so I think in the conditions that they played in, it was the conditions, it's like super wet and soggy out here with the rain pouring down. That's usually not a good setup for a USC Lincoln Riley team. But I was impressed by how they've handled it. I wouldn't pick them to win at Autzen, but they're just dangerous enough. They're not Minnesota going up there. Like, they have a ton of firepower. They can run the football. Whether, King Miller's been terrific. Wayman Jordan may be back for the next game in time. He was close for this one. Again, I wouldn't pick them against Oregon, but what's helped them, I think, also is they have a really good recruiting class coming in that's brought a lot of energy to the program. And I think that if they can sustain it, whether they win this week or not, if they don't get embarrassed here, you go 9-3, that is a big step forward for Lincoln Riley with this recruiting class coming in. I think it will get some of the old USC people off his back a little bit. And then, you can build on it because we know he can, if he's got good players offensively, he's dangerous because he's really good at scheming stuff up. So again, I wouldn't pick them to win, but I think they have been a really nice story in college football and in the Big Ten because they've won in some adverse ways. So I don't know. Go ahead, Ralph.
I was going to say, Stu, let me. I know you love scenarios. Can I tee you up for a scenario? Because I want you to tell me if this scenario is stupid. Okay. Because I got called stupid on Twitter last night for putting up this scenario, and I might be. If USC beats Oregon, I think there's this assumption that the winner gets in, right? That was what you had talked about. And that's probably more likely than not. I actually think it's a 1 in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. I think if USC beats Oregon, there's a chance only 2 Big Ten teams get in. I think all of a sudden you end up with like, oh, well, Notre Dame beat USC and Miami beat Notre Dame, so why do we want USC in there? And you also, again, we keep going back to this BYU Texas Tech scenario where if BYU wins the Big 12, Texas Tech is probably in as an at-large, and then we start talking 5, 6 SEC teams if that breaks out. So am I crazy that if I'm the Big 10, I'm like, hey, Oregon, let's just take care of business. We'll take our 3. We have 3 that could all win it all, by the way. I think we might have 3 that can win the whole damn thing. So am I crazy, Stu, to think that
no,
2, 10,
not
and 2?
at all.
Yeah, okay.
USC was 17th this week, right? So not by no means, I think. I mean, they'll probably move up. Actually, they may not move up. I mean, they're 17th, right? So the idea that they beat Oregon and they jump 8 spots or 9 or 7 or 8 spots is not a given by any means. It will feel like a big win if they win at Oregon, no question about it. But yeah, it's pretty crowded in there. Especially with those we haven't even really talked about those Big 12 teams that are hovering around. The Miami thing you talked about. again, like if you're going to respect head to head, doesn't Notre Dame box out a 10-2 USC? I would think it wasn't like that was a, fluky or down to the last second kind of win. So, um, does that end up being two Big Ten teams? Possibly. Bruce, I want to get back to what you said real quick, and then we'll move on from USC. But you said like 9-3, that would be a big step forward for Lincoln Riley. But USC fan base demands more than that. So I feel like they need to beat Oregon because that's the kind of win he just hasn't had yet so far there. They have the highest ranked team they've beaten was a number 13 LSU in the first game of last year. If USC wins at top 10 Oregon, ruins their season, it's like, oh, yeah, this is what we thought might happen or we were hoping would happen when we hired this guy. If they lose and they're 9-3, is that really, do USC fans get excited about 9-3?
It's a big step forward still. If they lose 50-14, probably different. If they lose competitively and it's 31-24, I think people look at it and go, you know what? We've taken strides. We have a recruiting class coming in that feels like what USC should be recruiting. I think that's a big part of it, is just like to give them hope on the future. Lincoln Riley's style of football is never going to be one where USC fans, and this is something, I didn't really get until I lived out here for a while. It is like what Notre Dame, feels like it is, what Georgia feels like. USC wants to be physical football. Yeah, Matt Leinart won a Heisman, and there was glitz to that team, and Carson Palmer won a Heisman. But this is a fan base that believes in, offensive linemen and running it down your throats and being the tougher team, right? That's what they take their pride in. And Lincoln's style of football, I'm not saying it's soft, but I think that's the perception of it. So I think it's a harder sell on Lincoln until he, honestly, until he probably wins a couple of playoff games for them to buy in. But I think what I'm saying is 9-3 with some decent road wins, with a win where they bullied Michigan at home. I think that's at least a step in the right direction, coupled with the best recruiting class Lincoln is in line to sign. I think that's a big step forward.
So here. Let me pivot here. What USC wants to be is like Georgia and Alabama, and a team that can win it all, right? So one of our commenters, Brandon Simmons, said, forget the rankings. How many teams do you actually think can win a title this year? I think Ohio State, Indiana, UGA, and I'm not sure if he has.
I don't know who's OUY.
Yeah, he has OUY, and I think he might be saying OU, and I think that's crazy wrong because I don't think that offense can win a national championship. But let's talk about Georgia and let's talk about Alabama. One won a huge game yesterday and one lost a big game yesterday. All year I think we've been operating under the assumption that Alabama beat Georgia, so Alabama's ahead of Georgia. Man, guys. I think Georgia might be the second best team in the country. I won't rank them that way, but I think they might be the second best team in the country. And all of a sudden, I find myself with Alabama thinking can that team that just cannot run the ball and has such spotty offensive line play win a national championship? So thinking along the lines of through the lens of Georgia and Alabama, Stu, who do you think can win a national championship?
Well, Georgia, I feel like we were in a lot of these episodes in September, October. We were like, yeah, that's not a Kirby Smart defense. They're kind of fortunate to win these games. I don't know if they'll make the playoff or not. And now I just think they absolutely look like a vintage Kirby Smart Georgia team. Gunnar Stockton,
maybe not vintage.
Not in the pass rush. I feel like some of this also is Texas feels like right now, especially now, a bad matchup for Georgia. I'm not saying that. I don't think that in terms of what Ralph just said, they would have elite guys in the D line. I don't think they have that, but I think almost everything else is really strong, and they are more than talented enough. I think in the trenches, in the running back room, and I think especially Gunnar Stockton, the way he plays, I think they're more than talented enough to win a national title, but I don't think they're what was winning back-to-back national titles. I think this is also, and I think it should be noted, this is a very young team, right? So what Ralph is kind of hinting at a little bit is what they look like in September and October. They're a really, really young team. And young teams, especially if they're well coached, and these guys are well coached, I think they get better and better as the year went on with more playing time and more practice time. And I think that's really what you're seeing, is you're seeing a team in Georgia that was one of the younger teams out there. And I think they've also made some good, very shrewd player additions. They don't throw the ball downfield too far. But Zachariah Branch is really good in the quick game stuff, and so it supplements things. And I think they do some really good stuff that way. That was my only point, Stu.
Yeah, no, it's not the 2021 Georgia defense, but to your point, it has gotten a lot better. And I feel like Saturday night we saw them flying at the ball. There were several times when Arch Manning looked like, good luck, man. Like, is he going to make it upright through this game? Because they were getting that kind of pressure they weren't getting early in the season. And then I can't say enough about Gunnar Stockton, who I doubted very much coming into the season. I was totally wrong about that. He was the last several games, he's looked very good, very sharp. Those touchdown passes to Nolan Thomas early in the game. So back to the question from our listener, I think I put them definitely on the list of teams that can win the title. Ohio State obviously is definitely on that list. Do you guys have Indiana on that list?
Yes, I do.
I guess. I know. I'm going to be that guy and still like look at the helmet, but
yeah,
that's not fair. It's not fair, especially with that quarterback.
Well, my question with Indiana has always been depth. Do they really have the depth to, as he said, win? They can beat anybody in the country on a given day. Can they win 3 or 4? I guess it'll only be 3 of those games in a row. But then I thought they really have showed that the last couple of weeks. They have been down a few guys, especially in that Penn State game, that they do have some reinforcements behind the scenes. Texas A&M.
Yeah, Charlie Becker's really stepped up. Go-to receiver goes down. Charlie Becker the last couple of weeks has been terrific for them.
Do we have Texas A&M on the list?
It's hard not to. I mean, I want to be optimistic and put a lot of teams on this list. So, like, I'm inclined to put Texas A&M on the list. And again, is Alabama? I'm just like, I want to make sure we cover Alabama. Is Alabama? Yeah,
Alabama's the big one.
Too? Are they on the list, Stu?
I'm going to say no. They have a great defense. They do. They did it. But I think you brought up a good point. Can they run the ball when it matters? I was a little surprised when I saw Ty Simpson third in our Heisman straw poll this past week. I think he's very good, but I haven't felt as like effusive about him as I have a couple other guys. And he did not have a great game Saturday night. Obviously, that pick 6 was a huge deciding play in the game. Now, when he's on. He's got great receivers.
Can I push back on one thing?
I think they can win games in the playoff. I don't think they can win the national title.
Just on Stu's point, and I get Stu's hesitance on there, I would push back on saying they have a great defense. They have a pretty good defense. They do not have a great defense. Well, I know
you hate the word great, so
let's say pretty good. I think it's relevant. If you have a great defense, if they did, like Georgia used to have a great defense. I'm just saying, like, I think they have a pretty good defense, and that's why
on the Stuart Mandel scale, they have a great defense, and on the Bruce Feldman scale, they have a very good defense. But either way,
I think they have a pretty good defense. I'm with Ralph. And I think the question should be, do they have enough in the run game to win a national title?
That's the problem.
That gives me pause.
Well, and the issue ends up being, because they don't run the ball well, I think it allows teams to sort of send the house out them, and that creates a problem for Simpson. Now, Oklahoma's pass rush is a special animal, but they're going to meet teams that can really get after it in a playoff. And I just wonder. It's funny because nobody gave Alabama the benefit of the doubt more this season than me, and now I find myself like after watching yesterday's game going, I don't know. But
so this is 3-0
they did also turn the ball over a lot, like 7, 8, like 5 times yesterday. Like,
but Oklahoma did that to them. But Oklahoma
that's also weird, that stuff. So,
right. I don't know. We have 4 teams on our list right now: Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, and Georgia, right?
Oregon? Is Oregon a yes for you guys?
I think Oregon and Texas A&M I'd like to put on there. I'd like to
put
Oregon and Texas.
You really have Oregon on there.
Again, I want to be optimistic. I want to start the playoff. Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame could be on there.
Notre Dame's on there.
I want to think that there are like 7 or 8 teams that could win this whole thing.
You talk about teams whose defense has gotten a lot better over the course of the season. Notre Dame, I mean, nobody knows Pitt better than Ralph, and they just Like their offense had been
They did.
playing very well until they ran into the Irish. Obviously, we know what they have in Jeremiah Love and CJ Carr. Can we all, just to speed this up a little bit, are we all a yay on Notre Dame?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Texas
pass game's
Tech.
Good. Yeah.
No, I am not buying that offense to win a national championship. Kicking all them field goals. No way. They win a game, maybe two, but they're not.
I think they can win games. I don't think they can win the national.
Can I throw the one caveat and then we can wrap and hit shout outs and then we can move on?
Well, there's one more team I want to bring up. But go ahead.
Okay. So you go one more team and then I'm going to hit one other thing.
So it's a team we haven't mentioned yet, but they were in a notable game yesterday, and that's Ole Miss.
No.
Florida gave them.
Ole Miss did not win a national championship. No.
Really? You were that sure about that?
I don't
They
think
can
their
win a
defense is
game.
that great.
I don't think,
Yeah.
no, I don't think they're good enough.
Yeah. It's funny.
They're
last
10-1.
Last
No, they're
year's
9-1.
Ole Miss team. Last year's
10-1.
Ole Miss team was better than this year's Ole Miss team. But the way it's going to break out, this one's going to make the playoff. But last year's team was built to win possibly games in the playoff, and I'm not sure this year's team is built to win multiple.
I will agree with you guys and say not national title, but I think people are underestimating how good they are. I mean, they down to the wire game at Georgia that they lost. They won at Oklahoma. The game last night was closer probably than it should have been, but do people not realize how good Kewan Lacey is? Like, he never comes up in those discussions, right? He ran for 224 yards and 3 touchdowns last night. Trinidad Chambliss is like, I don't know. I might be able to talk myself into them winning the national title here if I think it through.
I could talk myself into Bama. I can't talk myself into Ole Miss. The one caveat on all of this before we move on is we might just be underrating Ohio State, and they might be a lot better than everybody else. There's a very real world where Ohio State just plunders everybody else here.
It's possible, but if I'm going to get on A&M for the schedule that they've played, you got to say the same. I mean, they've spent Ohio State spent most of the season
Stu. I can
playing
see
these
Ohio
scrimmages.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's get to shout outs. You guys can argue with each other offline. We're going to start with you, Stu. Who is your shout out for this weekend?
I'm going to do, since we really ignored the ACC entirely, I'm going to go with an ACC team, and that's Wake Forest. They beat UNC. They beat Bill Belichick. Yeah, they beat Virginia, and they beat UNC and Bill Belichick. They're 7-3. Guys, Wake Forest was picked to finish 16th out of 17 in the ACC this year. And I think they've ended up being one of the better teams. They are not one of the 15 teams that can make it to the ACC championship game, but they're having a pretty good season nonetheless. I think Jake Dickert is turning out to be, because that was one where I was like, really? What's the connection? There's no connection there, but he's a good coach, and I would feel really encouraged about the future if I were a Wake fan. What about you, Ralph?
So I'm going to the Sun Belt. Georgia Southern beat Coastal Carolina, and O.J. Arnold, running back for Georgia Southern, had himself a day. 267 yards rushing. He caught a long touchdown pass. Boys, he threw a touchdown pass, and he ran for 2 touchdowns. A big game in the Sun Belt in terms of sort of standings and seedings. But O.J. Arnold, loved the versatility. Go off, young man. Great job yesterday against Coastal Carolina. Bruce?
I'm going to pick another running back as well, and that is Ahmad Hardy from Mizzou. He's been a great addition in the portal for Eli Drinkwitz. He went for 300 yards on the ground last night against Mississippi State. He leads the SEC in rushing. He's very Marshawn Lynchy in terms of he is a punishing runner. And credit to the Tigers, because since Eli's there, they have just kept on finding big-time running backs who've run all over the SEC. And I don't think we're talking enough about him. I mean, what he did last night was pretty amazing.
So, Bruce, we also want to, and I'm going to throw it to you because I think you know more about this subject than anybody else. We also want to kind of end on a solemn note, but someplace that a person who really does need to be recognized here.
Yeah. So on Friday, I went into the studio, and my colleague Chris Peterson, who everybody knows from the old, Boise State, Washington days, he was really shook up. And we talked about this. A guy who'd been a friend to many in the football world, John Beam. He's like a Bay Area football legend. He was shot and killed at Laney College in Oakland on Thursday. And he'd been a longtime coach there, and so many coaches developed really close relationships with him in the football world because they had recruited his players or got to know him. And Peterson told me a bunch of stories on Friday night just about what an awesome man he was and what a legacy he had for helping so many kids and families up there. Was just a giant in the football world. But even beyond that, I saw this from Damian Lillard, who's obviously a great NBA player. From there, and he said John Beam gave him his first job at Laney College football games. Quote, "Hundreds of kids all over Oakland became the type of men they are today because of this dude." Just wanted to say, our thoughts and prayers are with not only his family, but everybody he impacted, because his legacy is really a remarkable one. It's a really sad time of his death on Thursday.
You muted, Stu.
It's a really awful story. I knew what a big deal he was here in the Bay Area in Oakland. I did not realize. I guess I had just forgotten that he was on Last Chance U. His program was on Last Chance U for a year, so he was known by a lot of people nationally because of that. So just a really terrible thing. It was a former, not a former player of his, but a former player at a high school there and they knew each other. So targeted shooting, the police said. Condolences to his family and to a whole lot of people in the East Bay. We will be back for our show on Tuesday morning, where we will get into next week's games. As always, as always, send your email questions, though that's not till Thursday, till theaudiblepod@gmail.com. And remember to catch our show on YouTube, subscribe at Audible Show. We'll see you next time.